Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. The champagne flowed freely as laughter and chatter filled the elegant ballroom. I stood near the bar, surveying the crowd of well-wishers who'd come to celebrate my 25th wedding anniversary with Bethany. My wife was in her element, flitting from group to group, her infectious laugh carrying across the room. I nodded politely as another guest congratulated me, my mind already drifting to the mountain of paperwork waiting for me at the office tomorrow. "Nathan, there you are." Bethany's voice rang out as she appeared at my side, linking her arm through mine. "Why are you hiding over here? Come mingle." I forced a smile. "Just catching my breath, dear. It's quite the turnout." "Of course it is. 25 years is no small feat," she said, her words slightly slurred. "We should be proud." I raised an eyebrow. "How many glasses have you had?" Bethany waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be such a wet blanket. It's our party." She tugged on my arm. "Come on, Trevor and Emma just arrived. We should say hello." I allowed her to lead me across the room, nodding and smiling at familiar faces as we passed. Trevor Matthews, my oldest friend and trusted confidant, grinned as we approached. "There's the happy couple," he exclaimed, pulling me into a bear hug. "Congratulations, you old dog. How'd you manage to keep this beautiful woman by your side for a quarter century?" I chuckled, extricating myself from his embrace. I ask myself that every day. Emma, Trevor's wife, rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "Oh, please, Nathan. We all know Bethany's the lucky one." Bethany giggled, leaning heavily against me. "You've got that right, Emma." I snagged myself a real catch. I frowned slightly at her tone, but kept my voice light. "I think we're both fortunate. Have you seen Blake and Kelly?" I wanted to discuss that new investment opportunity. Trevor's eyes darted away for a moment. Yeah. I think I saw them by the dessert table earlier." As if on cue, Blake Norton appeared, champagne flute in hand. "Did I hear my name? Nathan, my man. Congratulations." I shook his hand firmly. "Thanks for coming, Blake. I was hoping we could chat about that tech startup I mentioned." Blake nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. But first, a toast to the happy couple." As the small group raised their glasses, I couldn't help but notice the way Bethany's gaze lingered on Blake. A familiar unease settled in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. Tonight was about celebration, not petty jealousies. The evening wore on, a blur of handshakes and well-wishes. I found myself constantly searching for Bethany in the crowd, her laughter growing louder and more frequent as the night progressed. Finally, I spotted her near the stage, microphone in hand. "Everyone, may I have your attention, please?" she called out, her words noticeably slurred. "I want to make a toast to my wonderful husband, Nathan." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. I tensed, sensing something was off. Bethany raised her glass, swaying slightly. "To 25 years of marriage, and to all the men who helped make it bearable." A nervous titter ran through the crowd. I felt the blood drain from my face. She continued, oblivious to the growing discomfort in the room. "At least half the men here know what I'm talking about." The silence that followed was deafening. I stood rooted to the spot, my mind reeling as I processed her words. Slowly, deliberately, I made my way to the ballroom doors and locked them with a decisive click. Turning back to face the stunned crowd, I met Bethany's gaze. "So tell me, Bethany," I said, my voice low and controlled, "which of you slept with my wife?" Bethany, still giggling, pointed unsteadily at Trevor and Blake. "These two, my favorite playmates. And we had threesomes." The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. I felt as if I'd been punched in the gut, but I refused to let it show. Instead, I walked calmly towards Trevor and Blake, who stood frozen in shock. "Is this true?" I demanded, my voice steady but laced with venom. Trevor's face paled. "Nathan, we can explain." Before he could finish, my fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling across a nearby table. Blake moved to intervene, but I was faster, fueled by a rage I'd never experienced before. "You bastards!" I roared, landing another punch on Blake's stomach. "I trusted you. Both of you." The room descended into chaos as guests scrambled to get out of the way. I barely registered Emma's screams or Kelly's shocked sobs. All I could focus on was the burning desire to make these men pay for their betrayal. Trevor, having regained his footing, tried to reason with me. "Nathan, please. It was a mistake. We never meant to hurt you." His words only fueled my anger. I lunged at him again, tackling him to the ground. We grappled on the floor, years of friendship evaporating in an instant. "How long?" I growled, pinning him down. "How long have you been sleeping with my wife?" Trevor's silence was all the answer I needed. I pulled back my fist, ready to strike again, when I felt strong hands grabbing me from behind. "That's enough," a gruff voice commanded. "Break it up." I turned to see 2 police officers restraining me. The fight drained out of me as quickly as it had come, leaving me feeling hollow and spent. As the officers separated us, I heard snippets of conversation around me. "Did you hear what his wife said? Poor Nathan, to find out like this. Those men deserve what they got." One of the officers approached me, his expression a mix of sympathy and professionalism. "Sir, we received reports of a disturbance. Do you want to press charges?" I looked at Trevor and Blake, both disheveled and avoiding my gaze. Then I turned to Bethany, who sat slumped in a chair, mascara streaking her cheeks. "No," I said finally. "No charges. Just get them out of here." The officer nodded, understanding in his eyes. As Trevor and Blake were escorted out, followed by their shell-shocked wives, I stood alone in the center of the room, surrounded by the wreckage of my marriage and the pity of our guests. "Party's over," I announced, my voice hoarse. "Thank you all for coming." As the last guest filed out, I turned to Bethany, who hadn't moved from her chair. "We'll discuss this in the morning," I said coldly, "when you're sober." Without waiting for a response, I walked out of the ballroom, leaving behind the shattered remains of what should have been a joyous celebration. The next morning, I woke with a pounding headache and a hollow feeling in my chest. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope that last night had been nothing more than a terrible nightmare. But as the events came rushing back, the pain in my knuckles confirmed the harsh reality. I found Bethany in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee. She looked up as I entered, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. "Nathan," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me last night." I poured myself a cup of coffee, buying time before I had to face her. "I think you do know, Bethany. The alcohol just loosened your tongue." She flinched at my words. "It was a mistake. A terrible, awful mistake. But it didn't mean anything, I swear." I slammed my mug down on the counter, coffee sloshing over the sides. "Didn't mean anything? You slept with my 2 best friends. For how long, Bethany? How long have you been making a fool of me?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. It started about 3 years ago. With Trevor. I was feeling lonely, and you were always working late. So this is my fault?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "Because I was busy providing for us, you decided to jump into bed with Trevor?" Bethany shook her head frantically. "No, that's not what I meant. I'm just trying to explain." "And Blake?" I pressed on, ignoring her excuses. "When did he join this little party?" She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "About a year after Trevor. It was at that Christmas party. We were all drunk, and one thing led to another." I laughed bitterly. "One thing led to another. How convenient. And the threesomes? Was that just another drunken mistake?" Bethany's silence was deafening. I turned away, unable to look at her. "You disgust me," I spat. "Get out of my house." "Nathan, please," she begged, reaching for my arm. "We can work through this. 25 years of marriage." I jerked away from her touch. 25 years of lies, you mean? Did you ever love me, Bethany? Or was I just a convenient paycheck while you had your fun? Her sobs grew louder. "Of course I loved you. I still love you, Nathan. It was just, I was weak. I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" I echoed incredulously. "A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill or burning dinner. What you did was a betrayal. You destroyed everything we built together." I stormed out of the kitchen and up to our bedroom. Yanking open the closet, I pulled out her suitcase and began throwing her clothes into it haphazardly. Bethany followed me, pleading, "What are you doing? Nathan, stop. We need to talk about this." I whirled around to face her. "There's nothing left to talk about. You made your choice. Now you have to live with the consequences." As I continued packing her things, my mind raced with questions. How many other men had there been? How many times had I been the oblivious fool, thinking my wife was faithful while she laughed behind my back? What about counseling? Bethany suggested desperately. We could see a therapist, work through our issues. I zipped up the suitcase with more force than necessary. Our issues? The only issue here is your inability to keep your legs closed. No amount of therapy can fix that. Dragging the suitcase down the stairs, I threw it at her feet. "Here, take your things and get out." Bethany stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't know, and I don't care," I replied coldly. "Maybe Trevor or Blake will take you in. After all, you seem to be quite comfortable in their beds." She flinched at my words. "Nathan, please. I know I hurt you, but we can get past this. We've been through so much together." "No, Bethany." I cut her off. "You've been through who knows how many men. I've been right here, thinking I had a loyal wife. Clearly, I was wrong." As she hesitated, clutching her suitcase, a spark of curiosity broke through my anger. "Tell me something, Bethany. Why did you do it? Was I not enough for you?" She shook her head, fresh tears spilling. "It wasn't about you, Nathan. I don't know why I did it. I felt neglected, I guess. You were always so focused on work, so you decided to focus on my friends instead?" I interrupted bitterly. "Did you ever think about talking to me? Telling me how you felt?" Bethany looked away, shame coloring her cheeks. "I should have. I know that now, but it seemed easier to find comfort elsewhere." I laughed humorlessly. "Comfort? Is that what you call betraying your husband and destroying your marriage?" She reached out, trying to touch my arm. "Nathan, please. I know I made terrible mistakes, but I love you. Can't we try to work this out?" I stepped back, avoiding her touch. "Love? You don't even know the meaning of the word. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this." As Bethany opened her mouth to respond, the doorbell rang. We both froze, staring at each other. "That'll be the locksmith," I said flatly. "I'm changing the locks. You need to leave now, Bethany." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "You're kicking me out? Just like that? Where am I supposed to go?" I shrugged, feeling a cold satisfaction at her distress. "That's not my problem anymore. You should have thought about that before you decided to sleep with half the neighborhood." As I moved to open the door, Bethany grabbed my arm. "Nathan, wait. What about our life together? Our friends, our family? What am I supposed to tell them?" I turned to her, my voice ice cold. "Tell them the truth, Bethany. Tell them how you betrayed your husband with his best friends. Tell them how you threw away 25 years of marriage for a few cheap thrills. I'm sure they'll be very understanding." The locksmith cleared his throat awkwardly, clearly sensing the tension. Should I come back later?" "No," I said firmly. "You can start now. My wife was just leaving." Bethany's shoulders slumped in defeat. She picked up her suitcase, taking one last look around the house we had shared for so many years. "I truly am sorry, Nathan," she whispered. "I hope someday you can forgive me." I watched her walk down the driveway, her figure growing smaller as she disappeared around the corner. As the locksmith began his work, I closed the door, leaning against it and letting out a shaky breath. The house felt emptier than it ever had before, but as the initial shock of Bethany's betrayal began to fade, a new emotion took its place: determination. She had humiliated me, betrayed me in the worst possible way. And now, as I stood in the wreckage of my marriage, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The first rays of sunlight crept through the blinds, finding me slumped in my office chair. I hadn't slept, my mind a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and plans for revenge. The bottle of scotch on my desk was significantly emptier than when the night began. A knock at the door jolted me from my thoughts. "Nathan, are you in there?" I recognized the voice of my sister, Sarah. With a groan, I pushed myself up and shuffled to the door, yanking it open. Sarah's eyes widened as she took in my disheveled appearance. Jesus, Nate, you look like hell. Thanks, I muttered, stepping aside to let her in. What are you doing here? She held up a paper bag. I brought breakfast. Figured you could use it after, well, you know. I snorted, returning to my chair. After my wife announced to the world that she's been screwing my best friends? Yeah, I could use a lot of things right now. Breakfast isn't high on that list. Sarah sighed, setting the bag on my desk. Have you talked to Bethany since last night? Oh, we talked, I said bitterly. Right before I kicked her lying, cheating ass out of my house. You what? Sarah exclaimed. Nathan, don't you think that's a bit hasty? I mean, 25 years of marriage. I slammed my fist on the desk, making her jump. 25 years of lies. She's been sleeping with Trevor and Blake for years, Sarah. Years. And who knows how many others. Sarah sat down across from me, her expression softening. I'm so sorry, Nate. I can't imagine how you must be feeling. I laughed humorlessly. No, you can't. Do you know what it's like to have your entire world shattered in an instant? To realize that everything you believed in was a lie? No, she admitted quietly. I don't. But Nate, people make mistakes. Maybe if you two went to counseling. I cut her off with a wave of my hand. Counseling won't fix this, Sarah. She didn't make a mistake. She made a choice. Multiple choices, over years. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes full of concern. What are you going to do? I stood up, pacing the room. I'm going to divorce her, obviously. But that's not enough. What do you mean, not enough? Sarah asked. I turned to face her, my jaw set. They humiliated me, Sarah, in front of everyone we know. Do you think I can just walk away from that? Sarah stood up, placing a hand on my arm. Nate, I know you're hurting, but don't do anything rash. I shrugged off her touch. Rash? Like sleeping with my best friends? No, what I'm going to do is calculated. You're scaring me, Nathan, Sarah said softly. This isn't like you. I laughed bitterly. The Nathan you knew died last night. This is who I am now. Sarah shook her head. You don't mean that. You're angry, and you have every right to be. But revenge won't make you feel better. Won't it? I challenged. Tell me, Sarah, what would you do if John cheated on you with your best friends? She hesitated. I don't know, but I wouldn't want to become someone I'm not. I walked to the window, looking out at the city. Maybe this is who I've always been. Maybe I just needed the right push. Sarah came to stand beside me. Nate, please. Talk to someone. A therapist, a lawyer, anyone. Don't do something you'll regret. I turned to her, my eyes hard. The only thing I regret is not seeing this sooner. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some calls to make. Sarah opened her mouth to argue, then closed it with a sigh. Just be careful, okay? And call me if you need anything. I nodded curtly. Thanks for breakfast. I'll talk to you later. As Sarah left, I sat back down at my desk, pulling out my phone. It was time to start planning. Bethany, Trevor, and Blake had no idea what was coming. I scrolled through my contacts until I found James, my old college roommate who now worked in cybersecurity. If anyone could help me dig up dirt on those backstabbers, it was him. The phone rang twice before James picked up. Nathan? What's up, man? I heard about last night. Are you okay? No, James, I'm not okay, I replied. But I will be. I need your help with something. There was a pause on the other end. What kind of help? I took a deep breath. The kind that might not be entirely legal. Are you in? Another pause, longer this time. Then, what do you need me to do? A grim smile spread across my face. I need you to hack into some emails and financial records. Can you do that without getting caught? James whistled low. That's some serious stuff, Nate. Who are we talking about? Trevor Matthews and Blake Norton, I said, my voice hard. I want everything you can find. Emails, bank statements, anything that looks suspicious. Jesus, Nate, James muttered. This could ruin them. I gripped the phone tighter. They ruined me, James. They deserve whatever's coming to them. There was a long silence before James spoke again. All right, I'm in. But be careful, man. This kind of thing can backfire. I'll take my chances, I said. How soon can you start? Give me a day or two to set up a secure system, James replied. I'll let you know when I'm ready. As I hung up, I felt a surge of anticipation. This was just the beginning. Bethany, Trevor, and Blake had no idea what was coming their way. They thought they could play me for a fool, but I would show them just how wrong they were. I opened my laptop and started researching divorce lawyers. It was time to cut all ties with Bethany and make sure she didn't get a penny more than she deserved. As I worked, I felt a cold determination settling over me. The pain of betrayal was still there, a constant ache in my chest, but it was overshadowed by a new purpose. They would pay for what they'd done, all of them. And when I was finished, they'd wish they'd never crossed me. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls, meetings with lawyers, and sleepless nights. I threw myself into work, desperate to keep my mind occupied. But every free moment was consumed with thoughts of revenge. My phone buzzed with a text from James. It's done. Check your email. With shaking hands, I opened my laptop and clicked on the encrypted file James had sent. As I scrolled through the documents, my eyes widened. This was better than I could have hoped for. I picked up my phone and dialed James. You're sure this is all legit? 100%, James replied. Trevor's been embezzling funds from his real estate company for years. And Blake? He's neck-deep in insider trading. It's all there in black and white. A cold smile spread across my face. Perfect. You've outdone yourself, James. Nathan, James said, his voice hesitant. Are you sure you want to do this? Once this information gets out, there's no going back. I gripped the phone tighter. They should have thought of that before they stabbed me in the back. Thanks for your help, James. I owe you one. After hanging up, I stared at the screen, my mind racing. I had the power to destroy them, to bring their carefully constructed lives crashing down around them. All it would take was one anonymous tip to the right people. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Was I really going to do this? Could I live with myself if I ruined their lives? Then I remembered Bethany's drunken confession, the look on Trevor and Blake's faces when they realized they'd been caught. My resolve hardened. I created an anonymous email account and began crafting messages to various news outlets and regulatory agencies. With each word, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. As I hit send on the last email, a wave of exhilaration washed over me. It was done. There was no going back now. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing incessantly. Bleary-eyed, I scrolled through the notifications. My heart raced as I saw headline after headline. Prominent real estate mogul accused of embezzlement. Investment banker caught in insider trading scandal. I turned on the TV, flipping to a news channel. Trevor's face filled the screen, looking haggard as he pushed through a crowd of reporters. Mr. Matthews, is it true that you've been stealing from your own company? How long has this been going on? Do you have any comment on the allegations? Trevor's voice cracked as he responded. I have no comment at this time. My lawyer will be issuing a statement shortly. The scene cut to outside Blake's office building. He looked even worse than Trevor, his usual polished appearance completely disheveled. Mr. Norton, how do you respond to the accusations of insider trading? Were you aware that your actions were illegal? Has your firm suspended you pending investigation? Blake pushed past the reporters, muttering, "No comment," as he ducked into a waiting car. My phone rang. It was Sarah. Nathan, are you seeing this? She asked, her voice filled with shock. I feigned surprise. Yeah, I just turned on the news. Can you believe it? Sarah hesitated. It's awful. I mean, what they did to you is terrible, but this? They made their own beds, I said coldly. Now they have to lie in them. Nathan, Sarah said slowly, you didn't have anything to do with this, did you? I paused, choosing my words carefully. Why would you think that? It just seems convenient, she replied. Right after what happened at your anniversary party. I forced a laugh. Come on, Sarah. Do you really think I have the power to uncover years of financial crimes overnight? This is just karma catching up with them. Sarah sighed. I suppose you're right. It's just such a shock. Emma and Kelly must be devastated. A twinge of guilt hit me at the mention of their wives, but I pushed it aside. They're better off knowing the truth about the men they married. As I hung up, my phone buzzed with a text from Bethany. Did you do this? I ignored it, tossing the phone aside. Let her wonder. Let her worry about what else I might know. Throughout the day, I watched as the scandal unfolded. Trevor's company issued a statement distancing themselves from him, pending a full investigation. Blake's firm suspended him indefinitely. By evening, both men had resigned from their positions, their reputations in tatters. As I sat in my office, watching the fallout of my actions, I felt a mix of satisfaction and unease. This was what I wanted, wasn't it? To see them suffer as I had suffered? But as I looked at the clock, realizing I'd spent the entire day obsessing over their downfall, I wondered if this revenge was costing me more than I'd anticipated. I shook off the doubt. This was just the beginning. I had more plans, more ways to make them pay, and I wouldn't stop until justice was served. The next phase of my plan required a more delicate touch. I destroyed Trevor and Blake's careers, but that wasn't enough. They'd invaded my personal life, so I would return the favor. I pulled out the file James had sent me, this time focusing on the personal emails and messages he'd uncovered. As I read through them, my stomach churned. The level of betrayal went deeper than I'd imagined. There were explicit messages between Bethany and both men, dating back years. Photos they'd shared, plans they'd made behind my back. It was all there, laid bare in black and white. I created 2 identical packages, each containing a selection of the most damning evidence. One for Emma, one for Kelly. As I sealed the envelopes, I hesitated. Was I going too far? Then I remembered the look on their faces at the anniversary party, the years of deception. My resolve hardened. I dropped the packages in the mail and waited. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was Emma, her voice choked with tears. Nathan? I got your package. I feigned ignorance. Package? What package? Emma's voice cracked. Don't play dumb, Nathan. I know it was you. Who else would have access to these messages? I sighed, dropping the act. I'm sorry, Emma. I thought you deserved to know the truth. How long have you known? She demanded. Not much longer than you, I replied. I found out the night of the anniversary party. Emma let out a sob. All those years. I trusted him. I trusted both of them. I felt a twinge of guilt, but pushed it aside. I'm sorry, Emma. I know how much this hurts. What am I supposed to do now? She asked, her voice small. I paused, choosing my words carefully. That's up to you, Emma. But if I were you, I wouldn't let him get away with it. There was a long silence before Emma spoke again, her voice stronger. You're right. Thank you for telling me, Nathan. I need to go. I have some calls to make. As I hung up, my phone buzzed with a notification. I opened it to find a social media post from Kelly, Trevor's wife. My eyes widened as I read it. To all those who thought they knew my husband, Blake Norton, you don't know him at all. A cheater, a liar, and now a criminal. Consider this my public declaration of divorce. Hashtag Time's Up. Attached to the post were screenshots of some of the messages I'd sent her. The post was going viral, shared and commented on by hundreds of people already. My phone rang again. This time, it was Blake. You son of a bitch, he snarled as soon as I picked up. You did this, didn't you? I kept my voice calm. Did what, Blake? Expose your lies? Your crimes? No, you did that all on your own. You ruined my life, he shouted. My career, my marriage, everything. And you ruined mine, I replied coldly. How does it feel, Blake, to have your whole world come crashing down around you? There was a moment of silence before Blake spoke again, his voice low and dangerous. This isn't over, Nathan. You'll regret this. I laughed humorlessly. No, Blake. You're the one who's going to regret ever crossing me. As I hung up, I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was what I wanted, wasn't it? To see them suffer as I had suffered? But as the day wore on, and I watched the fallout of my actions unfold on social media and news outlets, a hollow feeling began to grow in the pit of my stomach. Emma had filed for divorce, seeking full custody of their children. Kelly's post had gone viral, turning Blake into a social pariah overnight. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt empty. That night, as I sat alone in my empty house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd crossed a line. Yes, they had hurt me deeply, but had I become just as bad as them in my quest for revenge? I pushed the thought aside. I was too far in to back out now. There was still one more person who needed to pay for their betrayal. Bethany. The final phase of my plan was perhaps the cruelest, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Bethany had taken everything from me, my trust, my love, my dignity. Now it was time to take everything from her. I sat at my computer, staring at the files James had sent me. Among them were detailed records of Bethany's work emails and documents. It was all I needed to set my plan in motion. With skilled precision, I began to plant false evidence of corporate espionage in Bethany's work files. Fake emails discussing company secrets, doctored financial reports, even a fabricated agreement with a competitor. It was meticulous work, but I was driven by a cold determination. As I worked, my phone buzzed with a text from Bethany. "Nathan, please. Can we talk? I know I hurt you, but this has gone too far." I ignored it, focusing on my task. She'd had her chance to talk. Now it was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. The next morning, I received a frantic call from Bethany. "Nathan," she cried, her voice thick with tears. "They fired me. The company. They're saying I committed corporate espionage. They're suing me for breach of contract. How could this happen?" I feigned sympathy, even as a cold satisfaction settled in my chest. "I'm sorry to hear that, Bethany. That sounds serious." "You don't understand," she sobbed. "My career is over. No one will hire me after this. I don't know what to do." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the years of betrayal, the humiliation she put me through. My voice hardened. "I guess you should have thought about that before you decided to sleep with my best friends." There was a long pause before Bethany spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was you, wasn't it? You did this to me." I didn't bother denying it. "Consider it payback, Bethany, for every lie, every betrayal, every moment you made a fool of me." "Nathan, please," she begged. "I know what I did was wrong, but this is destroying my life." "Good," I replied coldly. "Now you know how it feels." As I hung up, I felt a wave of emotions wash over me. Satisfaction, yes, but also a gnawing sense of emptiness. I'd achieved what I set out to do. Bethany's reputation was in tatters, her career destroyed. She would never recover from this. But as I looked around my empty house, I realized that my revenge hadn't filled the void left by their betrayal. If anything, it had only made it deeper. I poured myself a drink, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. This was what I wanted, wasn't it? To see them all suffer as I had suffered? As the day wore on, I watched the fallout of my actions unfold. Bethany's name was dragged through the mud in industry publications. Former colleagues distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with her scandal. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. That night, as I sat alone in the dark, nursing another drink, I couldn't help but wonder. In my quest for revenge, had I lost sight of who I truly was? The thought gnawed at me, but I pushed it aside. I'd come too far to turn back now. The satisfaction of seeing Bethany's world crumble around her was intoxicating, even if it left a bitter aftertaste. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Bethany. "Nathan, please. I need to talk to you. Can we meet?" I stared at the screen, debating whether to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to let her suffer in silence. But another part, a part one thought I'd buried, was curious. "Fine," I texted back. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., the coffee shop on 5th. The next day, I arrived early, choosing a secluded table in the back. When Bethany walked in, I barely recognized her. Gone was the vibrant, confident woman I'd married. In her place was a shell, eyes red-rimmed and shoulders slumped. "Nathan," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Thank you for meeting me." I nodded curtly. "What do you want, Bethany?" She took a deep breath. "I want to apologize. What I did, it was unforgivable. I know that now." "You're right," I said coldly. "It is unforgivable." Tears welled in her eyes. "I understand. But Nathan, this revenge, it's destroying everyone. Not just me, but Emma, Kelly, their kids. Is that really what you want? For a moment, I faltered. The faces of innocent children flashed through my mind. But then I remembered the humiliation, the betrayal. They should have thought about that before they decided to betray me, I growled. Bethany reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of mine. I know you're hurting, but this isn't you, Nathan. The man I married wouldn't do this. I jerked my hand away. The man you married died the night of our anniversary party. You killed him. She flinched at my words. I made a terrible mistake, but two wrongs don't make a right. Please, Nathan, end this now, before it's too late. For a moment, I wavered. Was she right? Had I gone too far? But then I remembered the years of deception, the laughter behind my back. I stood up abruptly. It's already too late, Bethany. You made your choices. Now live with the consequences. As I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving Bethany sobbing at the table, I felt a mix of emotions. Satisfaction, yes, but also a creeping doubt. Had I become the very thing I despised in my quest for justice? I pushed the thought aside. There was no turning back now. The final act of my revenge was about to begin, and I was determined to see it through to the bitter end. Weeks passed, and the dust began to settle on the chaos I'd created. Trevor and Blake had all but disappeared from public life, their careers and reputations in tatters. Bethany's lawsuit with her former company was ongoing, leaving her financially and emotionally drained. I'd thrown myself into work, trying to ignore the nagging voice in my head that questioned whether I'd gone too far. But as I sat in my office late one night, a knock at the door jolted me from my thoughts. "We're closed," I called out, not bothering to look up from my paperwork. The door creaked open anyway. "Nathan?" I froze at the sound of Bethany's voice. Slowly, I raised my head to see her standing in the doorway, looking more haggard than ever. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice cold. Bethany took a hesitant step forward. "I needed to see you, to talk to you." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "I think we've said all there is to say, Bethany." She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "No, we haven't. Please, Nathan, just hear me out." Against my better judgment, I gestured to the chair across from my desk. 5 minutes. Bethany sat down, her hands trembling. "I know what I did was unforgivable. I betrayed you in the worst possible way, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." "Is that all?" I asked, my tone icy. "Because if you came here expecting forgiveness—" "No," she interrupted. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But Nathan, what you've done, it's gone too far." I felt a flare of anger. "Too far? You humiliated me in front of everyone we know. You slept with my best friends for years. And you think my response has gone too far?" Bethany flinched at my words. I know how much I hurt you. But destroying people's lives, their careers, their families, that's not you, Nathan. The man I married wouldn't do that." "The man you married died the night of our anniversary party," I spat. "You killed him with your betrayal." She reached across the desk, her hand stopping just short of mine. "He's still in there. I can see it. The Nathan I fell in love with, the kind, compassionate man who always saw the best in people. Please, let him out." For a moment, I felt my resolve waver. But then I remembered the years of deception, the laughter behind my back. "That Nathan was a fool," I said, my voice hard. "He trusted blindly and got burned for it. I won't make that mistake again." Bethany's shoulders slumped. "So that's it? There's no hope for us? For forgiveness?" I stood up, walking to the window. "Forgiveness? Bethany, you didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice. Every day, for years, you chose to betray me, to lie to me, to make a mockery of our marriage." "I know," she whispered, "and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But Nathan, can't we start over? Try to rebuild what we had." I turned to face her, my expression cold. "Start over? There's nothing to start. Our marriage was built on lies. Here's your final gift from me." I walked back to my desk, pulling out a file and sliding it across to her. Bethany's hands shook as she opened it, her face paling as she realized what she was looking at. "Divorce papers?" she gasped. I nodded. "I think it's time we made this official, don't you?" Tears streamed down Bethany's face as she stared at the documents. "Nathan, please. I made a terrible mistake. Can't we work through this?" "Work through it?" I laughed bitterly. "Bethany, you didn't forget to pick up milk on the way home. You had an affair. Multiple affairs. With my best friends. For years. That's not something you work through, da." She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "People make mistakes, Nathan. Even big ones. But they can change, grow. We could go to counseling, try to rebuild trust." "Trust?" I interrupted. "Bethany, I wouldn't trust you to water my plants, let alone be my wife. It's over. Sign the papers." Bethany's shoulders slumped in defeat. "Is this really what you want? To throw away 25 years of marriage?" I leaned forward, my voice low and dangerous. "No, Bethany, this isn't what I want. What I wanted was a faithful wife. What I wanted was a marriage based on trust and respect. You're the one who threw that away. I'm just making it official." She stared at the papers for a long moment before reaching for a pen. As she signed her name, her tears fell onto the document. "I truly am sorry, Nathan," she whispered. "I hope someday you can forgive me." I took the papers back, my face impassive. "Don't hold your breath. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." As Bethany stood to leave, she paused at the door. "This isn't you, Nathan. This bitterness, this need for revenge. It's eating you alive. I hope you can find peace." I turned back to my computer, not bothering to look at her. "Goodbye, Bethany." As the door closed behind her, I felt a mix of emotions wash over me. Relief, yes, but also a gnawing emptiness. I'd achieved what I set out to do. Bethany was out of my life for good. So why didn't I feel victorious? I pushed the thought aside. There was still one more act to play out in this drama, and I was determined to see it through to the end. As I sat in my office the next day, reviewing the final details of my divorce settlement, a knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called out, not looking up from my papers. James, my old college roommate and reluctant accomplice in my revenge plot, stepped into the room. His face was grave. "Nathan, we need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. I leaned back in my chair, eyeing him warily. "What's wrong?" James took a deep breath. "I've been doing some more digging, like you asked, about Bethany's finances." I nodded, feeling a spark of anticipation. "And? What did you find?" He hesitated, then pulled out a flash drive from his pocket. "You're not going to like this, man." I plugged the drive into my computer, my eyes widening as I scrolled through the documents James had uncovered. Bank statements, transfer records, offshore accounts, all in Bethany's name. "She's been siphoning money from our joint accounts," I muttered, my voice tight with anger. "For years." James nodded grimly. "It looks that way. She's got quite a nest egg built up in that offshore account." I slammed my fist on the desk, making James jump. "That lying, cheating. I can't believe this. After everything else she's done. What are you going to do?" James asked cautiously. I stood up, pacing the room as my mind raced. "What am I going to do? I'm going to make her pay, that's what. This is financial fraud, James. She could go to jail for this." James shifted uncomfortably. "Nathan, man, don't you think you've done enough? I mean, you've already destroyed her career, her reputation." I whirled on him. "Enough? She stole from me, James. On top of everything else. No, this is the final straw. I'm calling the police." As I reached for my phone, James grabbed my arm. "Wait, just think about this for a minute. Is this really what you want?" I yanked my arm away. What I want? What I wanted was a faithful wife who didn't steal from me. Bethany made her choices. Now she can face the consequences. James sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I get it. She hurt you. Badly. But man, this vendetta, it's changing you. The Nathan I knew in college wouldn't do this." For a moment, I faltered. Was he right? Had I gone too far? But then I remembered Bethany's betrayal, the years of lies, and now this theft. "The Nathan you knew was a fool," I growled. He trusted blindly and got burned for it. I won't make that mistake again. I picked up my phone, dialing the police. As I reported Bethany's fraud, I felt a mix of emotions. Satisfaction, yes, but also a creeping sense of unease. Was this really justice, or had I crossed a line? Hours later, I watched from my office window as Bethany was led out of her apartment in handcuffs. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and the look of betrayal and hurt on her face made my stomach churn. As the police car drove away, I turned back to my desk, pouring myself a drink. I'd won. Bethany would face the full consequences of her actions. So why did victory taste so bitter? My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Just heard about Bethany. Nathan, what have you done? I ignored it, tossing the phone aside. They didn't understand. None of them did. This was justice, wasn't it? As night fell, I sat alone in my darkened office, the weight of my actions settling heavily on my shoulders. I'd set out to right a wrong, to reclaim my dignity. But as I looked at the man staring back at me in the reflection of my computer screen, I had to wonder. In my quest for revenge, had I become the very thing I despised? Weeks passed, and the dust began to settle on the chaos I'd created. Bethany's arrest had been the final nail in the coffin of our social circle. Friends and acquaintances alike distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. I threw myself into work, trying to ignore the nagging voice in my head that questioned whether I'd gone too far. But as I sat in my office late one night, a knock at the door jolted me from my thoughts. "Come in," I called out, not bothering to look up from my paperwork. Sarah stepped into the room, her face a mask of concern. "Nathan, we need to talk," I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "If this is about Bethany—" "It's about you," she interrupted, sitting down across from me. "Nathan, I'm worried about you. This isn't you." I felt a flare of irritation. "You don't know what you're talking about, Sarah. They betrayed me. They deserved what they got." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes pleading. Did they? Did Emma and Kelly deserve to have their lives torn apart? Did Bethany deserve to go to jail? "She stole from me," I growled, "on top of everything else." "And you stole her future," Sarah shot back. "Her career, her freedom. Nathan, when does it end?" I stood up, pacing the room. "It ends when justice is served." Sarah stood as well, blocking my path. Justice? Or revenge? Because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot like the latter. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I turned away, staring out the window at the city lights. "You don't understand," I muttered. "The humiliation, the betrayal." Sarah's voice softened. "You're right. I don't understand how much they hurt you. But Nathan, look at yourself. Look at what this vendetta has done to you. Is this really who you want to be?" For the first time in months, I allowed myself to really look at my reflection in the window. The man staring back at me was a stranger, his eyes cold and hard, his face etched with bitterness. I faltered, my certainty wavering. "I don't know anymore." Sarah placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "The Nathan I know is kind, compassionate. He sees the best in people, even when they've hurt him. That man is still in there somewhere. You just need to let him out." I turned to face her, feeling the walls I'd built around my heart begin to crumble. "How? After everything that's happened, how do I come back from this?" She smiled softly. "One step at a time. Start by forgiving yourself. Then maybe, someday, you can think about forgiving them." As Sarah's words sank in, I felt something shift inside me. The anger and bitterness that had driven me for so long began to ebb away, leaving behind a profound sense of weariness. "What have I done, Sarah?" I whispered, sinking back into my chair. She knelt beside me, taking my hand. "You made mistakes. We all do. The question is, what are you going to do now?" I looked around my office, at the trappings of success that suddenly seemed so hollow. "I don't know. I can't undo what I've done." Sarah squeezed my hand. "No, you can't. But you can choose who you want to be moving forward. The man who holds onto his anger and bitterness, or the man who learns to forgive and move on." As the first light of dawn began to creep through the window, I made my decision. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight. but I was ready to reclaim the man I used to be, the man I wanted to be again. I want to make things right, I said finally. As much as I can, anyway. Where do I start? Sarah smiled, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. How about we go get some breakfast? You look like you could use a good meal and some fresh air. As we walked out of the office together, I felt lighter than I had in months. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time since that fateful anniversary party, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.